Is Iran getting better at this throughout this war? And do you think that they're likely getting help from Russia or China? Are we providing adequate security for our service members abroad? You broke with your party in the Senate to block measures intended to limit President Trump's war powers in Iran. Do you worry at all that this war is now escalating into a wider war? Do you have any questions about the president's war strategy? You've said that if the Democratic Party becomes officially and overtly hostile to Israel, that might cause you to leave the party. When do you view the party as becoming officially overtly anti-Israel?
Everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a major political rift opening up within the Democratic Party. Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania recently sat down with CNN and delivered his most blunt warning yet. He has laid down a clear red line regarding his future in the party. Fetterman explicitly stated that if the Democratic platform officially embraces anti-Israel policies, driven by pressure from progressive groups like the Democratic Socialists of America, he would force himself out of the party. As fractures deepen between traditional party members and the rising progressive wing over foreign policy, Fetterman's fiery comments signal real trouble for Democratic unity. What does this mean for the future of the party's coalition? Let's check out the commentary clip and unpack what he had to say. Let's jump straight to the video. For further context on his full statements, check out this CNN interview clip of Senator John Fetterman. This report captures Senator Fetterman directly laying out his red line on Democratic support for Israel and addressing his tensions with the party's progressive base.
Now to respond is Democratic Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. And Senator, thanks for joining us. I want to get your response to what we heard from Dr. El-Sayed, but first I want to ask you about the 2 U.S. service members killed after Iranian missile and drone attacks in Jordan Friday. You broke with your party in the Senate to block measures intended to limit President Trump's war powers in Iran. Do you worry at all that this war is now escalating into a wider war? Do you have any questions about the president's war strategy?
I think it's incredibly important to confront Iran and to confront Iran with their ambitions, specifically the nuclear ambitions. Every single Democrat that I'm aware of says we must never let Iran build a nuclear bomb. And here we are again right now. Negotiations and all other kinds of strategies have been employed over the last. And so where I'm at, I think we're in an important point in our time. And I think it's entirely appropriate to continue to confront Iran.
Okay. Let's talk about the split in the Democratic Party, because Michigan candidate Dr. El-Sayed has been very critical of AIPAC, but when asked if there's room in the party for Israel supporters, he said, quote, "There's always room in the tent, the Democratic Party tent, for folks." He obviously holds a very different view on Israel than you do. Can the Democratic Party, can the big tent be home to both someone like Dr. El-Sayed and someone like you?
I think it's entirely appropriate to be pro-Palestinian. And of course, I'm deeply sympathetic to many of innocent Palestinians as well over. But where we have become parts in our party now, describing Israel is genocidal state or apartheid state, and now we're not going to vote for any kind of aid. And now even people like the J Street organization are going to vote against basic things like the Iron Dome. And it's getting more and more incredibly hostile towards Israel. Israel is our important key ally. When candidates like you've had Dr. on just before me won't criticize Iran. In fact, he'll warn his supporters, well, we can't just be talking about that the leader of Iran was eliminated, which I think I'm proud to say that's a great thing. You know, eliminating Hamas leadership, eliminating Hezbollah leadership or Iran, that makes things safe and more just, and that's entirely appropriate views.
You've said that if the Democratic Party becomes officially and overtly hostile to Israel, that might cause you to leave the party, to become an independent, to be clear, not to become a Republican. This week, there was a vote in the House to cut off more than $3 billion in military aid to Israel. There are 212 House Democrats. 103 of them voted to cut off that aid. The people voting included former Speaker Nancy Pelosi voting to cut off aid. When do you view the party as becoming officially overtly anti-Israel? When When it's all of the House Democrats doing that, when it's a majority, because you're pretty close right there with 103 out of 212.
Well, candidates run on a platform, and if that becomes the Democratic platform, that we will now ever vote for any aid and we'll turn our back on Israel, then that makes me to make that decision as really what a Democrat should stand for, or being a part of my party for me. Now, Jake, I've said this, that if I change my party spontaneously right now, my views and my votes aren't going to change. It's really more of a statement how, and if you look at the kind of people that are winning our primaries, their centerpieces of their campaign is anti-Israel kinds of rhetoric, whether it's in my state or it's whether in New York City and what's happening in Colorado now too. If you believe the Democratic Party's future is rooted in describing Israel as apartheid state or genocidal and they don't deserve to have our support, that forces me to say, is this really make sense for me as a Democrat with these views are continue to actually intensify?
Let's turn to the president's speech a few days ago and the subsequent action by the Homeland Security Secretary, Mark Wayne Mullen, who alleged with no evidence that more than 250,000 non-citizens are on voting rolls in at least 4 states, including your home state of Pennsylvania. Secretary Mullen threatened state election officials with fines and potentially prison time if they don't comply with the Trump administration's efforts to hand over their voting rolls to determine if non-citizens are on the rolls. So what did you think of that?
Well, I was lieutenant governor during the 2020 election, and I've appeared on your network and many other networks at that time. That election was absolutely secure, fair, and accurate. And now I defended Al Schmidt, a Republican out of Philadelphia, and he described those circumstances absolutely fair and safe. That was the voice of Pennsylvania, and they picked Joe Biden in 2020. That's a fact. Now I have a long documented record of defending and making sure people in America heard that the Pennsylvania election was absolutely secure in 2020. Now, until I see evidence that over 250,000 migrants that are registered to vote, then yeah, that would make me reconsider some of these things. But there's no evidence, and I don't expect that we'll see any of that. And I also would remind people in Pennsylvania, out of 67 counties, vast majority of them are deep red counties, and they've never encountered any kinds of fraud. Now, I don't know why the president is dragging up all of this stuff. You're the president. Do something positive. And you are talking about 2020. That's been settled over 6 years ago. It's deeply unhelpful, and that distracts important things, especially like the Iranian war right now.
All right, Senator John Fetterman, Democrat of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
What you are looking at here is a raw, unedited snapshot of a major fracture opening up right inside the Democratic Party. As CNN's Jake Tapper sits down with Senator John Fetterman on State of the Union, the Pennsylvania senator isn't mincing words or hiding behind standard political talking points. He is drawing a definitive line in the sand regarding U.S. policy toward Israel. When pressed by Jake Tapper on the shifting tides within his own party and the growing influence of progressive factions like the Democratic Socialists of America, Fetterman delivers a blunt ultimatum. He makes it crystal clear that if the official Democratic platform shifts to an anti-Israel stance, he is walking away from the party entirely. For a high-profile senator representing a critical battleground state like Pennsylvania, this isn't just a casual disagreement over foreign policy. It is an open challenge to the party's establishment and its progressive wing. Fetterman's willingness to lay down a red line live on national television highlights an ideological civil war that national party leadership cannot afford to ignore. As you watch this exchange, pay close attention to how sharply he defines his boundaries and what it signals for the future alignment of the Democratic coalition.
Admiral, thanks for joining us. So these are the first American deaths from hostile fire since the ceasefire crumbled. President Trump had previously said he would consider going back to full-fledged war if U.S. troops were killed. Do you think the president needs to lay out what his war strategy is moving forward? And does he have any good options here?
Let's start by just taking a beat on two more dead Americans, brave men and women, now up to 16. Whatever your tradition, I hope you raise a glass to them tonight, all volunteers. In terms of the president's options, Jake, I'd say he has three options and none of them are good. One, he can simply do Pontius Pilate and walk away from this. That would be a terrible outcome for the United States, for the Gulf, for global trade. I don't think he's going to do it, but that certainly is an option. Option two, he can go big. And I mean back to the level of strikes we were at the start, hundreds of strikes a day, and amping up, going after targets that put pressure on the Iranian economy. That would be a big military move, and that could include boots on the ground. That's a bad option because it's expensive, and no one wants boots on the ground, and it just doesn't kind of add up for the American public. And then third and finally, so, okay, Admiral, where does he land? Probably with option three, which is what you're seeing, increasing to some degree the kinetic activity, the bombs, increasing economic sanction pain, hopefully getting our allies on side, and above all, keeping the door open for negotiation. Some have called this, and I think it's accurate, escalate to de-escalate, to force them back to the table.
Before these deaths were reported, the Wall Street Journal reported that Iran has adapted to U.S. defenses, and Iran is now capable of firing missiles that can maneuver and travel at high speeds to hit sensitive targets, such as the ones hit in Jordan, although that was a drone strike. Is Iran getting better at this throughout this war? And do you think that they're likely getting help from Russia or China?
As we say in the military trade, the enemy gets a vote. And the Iranians are adaptive. By the way, they're watching what's happening very closely in Ukraine, where they are kind of playing the part of the Ukrainians, using innovation, using drones, using maneuver, trying to inflict cost on us the same way the Ukrainians are trying to inflict cost on Vladimir Putin. And I would say they don't have a great hand of cards, but they're playing it pretty well. Kind of reminiscent of the North Vietnamese in the war in Vietnam or the Taliban in Afghanistan. So they're working to make us determine that this candle is not worth the game, that we would, in fact, ultimately walk away. I don't think they'll succeed at that strategy, but it's certainly the one they're pursuing, and they are thus far at least hanging around the hoop and staying in the game.
Are we providing adequate security for our service members abroad? There has been a lot of coverage, CBS News, The Washington Post, about those initial casualties, U.S. casualties. I believe they were in Kuwait, and how there weren't sufficient alarms and protections.
The Pentagon is going to tear apart every single one of these strikes. Here, I'm confident they will do whatever it takes to increase the protection. What I'm a little bit worried about, Jake, is not so much in the Middle East, but it is attacks against our bases and our troops elsewhere in the world where there might be less alert presence. So think Europe, where we have 100,000 U.S. troops. Think Korea. Think Japan or Okinawa, part of Japan. Those are vulnerabilities that I think the Iranians would not pause at exploiting. I'll give you one other point to think about as we look at this war unfolding. We are all fixated, we should be, on the Suez Canal. We all know that 20% of the world's gas and oil flows through it, 20% of the fertilizer. There's another choke point right to the left on the map, to the west. It's called the Suez Canal. It's got more traffic flowing through it than the Strait of Hormuz, and the Iranians are beginning to make noises about attempting to close that using the Houthis in the southwest corner and so of the Arabian Peninsula. So that ought to be in the back of everyone's mind. Final thought, that may be why you're seeing attacks in Jordan right now, which is the northern tip of the Red Sea. So watch the Suez Canal as a way the Iranians could make another move.
All right, Admiral James DeFreitas, thank you so much. Appreciate your time, sir. Coming up.
This report brings urgent focus to an escalating crisis that extends far beyond standard diplomatic posturing. With rising regional military friction, targeted strikes, and ongoing risks to forces deployed throughout the Middle East, national security officials are grappling with a rapidly moving security environment that carries global consequences. On the tactical front, military planners are facing mounting operational and financial demands. Defense operations in the theater continue to draw heavily on resources, putting immediate pressure on congressional funding allocations and defense stockpiles. At the same time, strategic deterrence remains a major concern. Targeted air campaigns and maritime operations have yet to fully halt asymmetric threats across critical global trade corridors, like the Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz, where international commercial shipping faces constant vulnerability. Beyond the immediate tactical footprint, the strategic fallout is reverberating across global markets and international relations. Spikes in energy prices and disruptions to energy corridors threaten to spark renewed economic friction globally. Meanwhile, major rival powers are carefully observing how heavily U.S. military assets and diplomatic focus are tied down in the region. Domestically, this ongoing strain is driving intense debate on Capitol Hill over military authorization, exit strategies, and how to balance defense readiness against domestic economic priorities. As national security experts on State of the Union point out, every decision made in this window carries huge stakes for stability both at home and abroad. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this breakdown insightful and want to stay informed on breaking geopolitical developments, make sure to hit that like button, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more updates.